Welcome back to the fifth video in this series. Today we will be taking a look at how we can create our own HUD, where we can show the next piece, the score, and we want to also implement a way to stop the game if we lost or if we just simply want to restart. We can also restart, and that will be all for this video. So if you haven't watched any previous tutorials in this series, please do so by going to the channel, and there will be a playlist where I have every single video so far. And without further ado, let's get started with the HUD. Alright, so to make a HUD, we want to make a new scene, and we simply make that a canvas layer, and we will just simply name this game HUD. And then in here, we want to add a panel in which we will show the next piece. So for this, we want to actually change the size up. So what we can do is we come here, we hit 200 by 200. Actually, let's do 150. And then we want to align it on the right here because that's where we show the piece in the current situation. So what we can do to do that is we want to transform it and we want to move it to the right here. Now it would be something like this. I'm not entirely sure where it'll be, but we can play around with that. One thing we can also do if you want to do it more centered and stuff, we could also use these here to align it on the right and the center. But for now, we'll just use the actual predefined setting here. So after we've done that, in our case, or in my case, I don't want a background. So what you can do is you can come over here to theme, and theme overrides, styles, and then we can add a new flag color. Now when we select this, we can actually go to the background color and we can change the alpha here. So in our case, we want it to be fully transparent. But you could also just choose a color that you'd want to show here. It's totally up to you. In my case, I'll just make it transparent. And then I simply want to add a border around the actual next piece so we do know what's going on and we do know what it's for. And then we want to set the border color to a bit of a darker color here. And that's pretty much it for the next piece. Now if you want to add a text above it, what we could do is we could actually go ahead and just simply add a label here. And we could have something like incoming or something, or just simply next piece. I'll just name it incoming. And we can also align this right up here. Now we probably want to increase the font size for this. So what you can do is you can come down to the theme overrides and then font sizes. And in here we can change the actual font size. In our case, I'll just do a bit of a bigger one so we can easily see it. And we can place it right there. That's fine for now. And then what we also want to do is we want to add a score label. So we do that and we just place something in here for now. So score 0. We want to rename this to actually name it score label so that we can reference it later into our code. And for now, we'll just place it here nearly at the center. And we'll also make it the same size as we did with the incoming text. So 32. And then we just place that somewhere over there. That'll be fine. Maybe just center this as well a bit. We could obviously make this better, but yeah, we'll just do it fast here. And then also, if we were to add a game over function, the game over functionality right here, we would also want to add a game over label and otherwise a restart label maybe even. So we could do something like game over label. And we probably would want to place this in the center. So we just click that. And we could do something like game over to notify the player that they basically lost, right? So now to actually reference this into our main scene, we first want to save this into the scenes folder. Then we go to main and we simply want to drag the scene into this here. So there we go. Now we have the actual HUD inside of our game, and we can see what that would look like if everything was functional. Now one thing I want to do is by default hide the game over label so that it doesn't show when we're playing. And then also we can actually test out if the next piece is actually going to be inside of the frame here, which it is not. So what we can do is we could either move the next piece down or we could move the frame up. In my case, I'll just go ahead and do, yeah, I'll move the frame up, I guess. That'll be easier. Or no, I'll move the next piece up, or down. That would be easier. So what we want to do is we could go into our, let's see here, right here, when we render the next piece, we want to basically change the second variable here, which is the y value. So that would probably be something like 6. Yeah, that's fine. I think that's acceptable. Let's see what that would look like with other pieces. Yeah, still fine. We can see the other piece is actually drawing on top of it now, but yeah, we'll move it 1 pixel to the left as well. So 14 and 6. And then what we want to do is we want to come over to where we clear the next piece. We want to just modify this to be 6 to 10, and I guess 13 to 18. Now this should clear every piece inside of the frame. That actually looks a bit more weird when we moved it 1 to the left. Yeah, so we'll move it back to the right by 1. There we go, and then we want to change this back to 14 and 19. Yeah, that's fine. Good enough. So that's the next piece. Now we can go ahead and continue with the score. So let's do that right now. Alright, so next up we have the score. What we want to do is we want to have two new variables actually. We want to have one for the score itself, which will keep track of the score, and one that will be the reward we give the player when we actually clear a line here. So we'll just name this clear reward, I guess. And we set that to 150. Now this reward you can change yourself, obviously. I'm not sure what the default value is or what they use in Tetris. I think it's a bit more advanced. But for this tutorial, I'll just use this score here. Alright, so then what we want to do, inside of our start new game function, we clear the actual score here first. So we always have a score of 0 when we start a new game. And then down over here, where we actually clear the line in our check rows function, we also want to add the score, or I mean add the reward to the score. So we do score plus equals clear reward. So then we want to update our score label. So what we can do is type this. What this will do is it will just print the score and make it into a string and then actually display it when we clear a line. Next up, what we want to do is we want to make a clear board function, because when the game is over, we obviously want to start a new one, and we want to make sure the board is actually cleared before we play along. So what we can do is we can come over here to this spot. It doesn't really matter. We want to make a clear board function, which will basically just return nothing. Then we want to iterate over all of the cells. So what we can do is go ahead and make 2 for loops, one going over the rows and one going over the columns. And then what we want to do is we want to erase every cell that is inside of these coordinates. So we basically go ahead and add vector 2i, and then j plus 1 and the I plus 1. So this way we have made our clear board function and we can now use it above here inside of our start new game. So we can come right over here and we can go ahead and clear everything before we start with the new code. So we clear our tetromino, we clear the board, and then we make sure we clear our next preview panel. And you can also see I have added the visibility inside of the code because that would give me more control. So instead of having to hide it here, we just do it in the start new game and we make sure this is on false instead of true, so that it isn't visible when we start the game and it will only be visible when we get a game over. So that's what we will be doing right now. Right, so to make this check game over, where we basically check if the game is over, so how we do that is we want to go ahead and loop over our active pieces, and then we want to actually go ahead and check if the space is free or not. So if it's within bounds that we have made here somewhere, there we are. So in order to do this, we can go ahead and check the game over. So is game over. And then we want to loop over the active tetrominoes. And then for every piece of the tetromino, we want to make sure it's free. And if it's not free, it means it's game over because we can't go higher anymore. So that is why it would be considered game over. So if it's within bounds, or if it's not within bounds, sorry, the I plus the current position, then we want to go ahead and actually make sure we land or we place our tetromino. So right here, the land tetromino. Land tetromino. And that way we only move the piece when there's actually a valid location. And if it's not a valid location, we know it's going to be game over and we can actually go ahead and stop the game. So one thing we want to do is we want to actually set the game over label to be visible. So we can just copy this, and instead of false, you guessed it, we want to make sure we set this to true so that it will show right over here. Now the game over label will go a bit to the left because I noticed it wasn't really centered when playing. So as we can see, it's a bit better now, but we can actually go ahead and just move it a tiny bit to the right here. Yeah, that's fine for now. It's just a quick example. So then we want to go ahead and obviously check if the game is over. And we do this by going over here into our move tetromino. And below the initialize tetromino, we want to also check if the game is over. So we just call our isGameOver function right here. Right, so now we don't actually have a way to know if our game is running or not. So in order to do this, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and define a new variable, which we will call isGameRunning. And then in our start new game, we want to make sure this is going to be set to true. Then what we want to do is in here in the physics process, we want to actually move everything inside of a if statement to check if our game is running. So to do this, we will simply do isGameRunning, and then we basically indent everything that is in here by hitting tab while everything is selected. And then before we forget, we also want to make sure that the isGameRunning will be disabled right over here so that we also have that set up so that it won't actually process all of our tetrominoes when we have a game over. So that way we don't get movement even though we have frozen the scene. As we can see, we just played this out and we now get a game over when we actually hit the top here and it notices there is no free space above. So that way we show the game over text right over here. So now you may have noticed, how are we going to start a new game? So one way to do this is we can add a button right here or something, or we could also just start the game over again. In our case, we'll just add a simple button that just makes a new game when the game is over. So in order to do this, we want to change our game HUD. So over here, we can go ahead and add a button. We'll call this restart game or start game button. Alright, so once we have made the button, we want to come over to our script and we want to reference the button. So to do this, we simply reference the game HUD and then the start game button, and then we add a pressed listener that will basically listen to every time it's pressed, and then we connect a function to it. So in our case, the start new game. So now every time that this button is pressed, we will basically start the game and we will allow the player to start a new game. So this will now be available every time you click on this, right? So you can see right here that we can click it even if we are playing. Now, if this is something you don't want and you only want it to show when the game is over, I'll show you right now how you can implement that. So one way to do that is we want to go ahead and by default hide the button. So just like we did over here, we want to do the same for the start new game button, which we will set to false. And then we can copy this new connect listener, and we basically move this down to where we start a new game, or I mean where we show the game over label. And in here we want to connect the listener, and we also want to set the button to actually be visible like this. So now when the game is over, we get that button to be visible, and then we can start a new game. So let's show that right now. There we go. Now you can see that once the game was over, we get the button start new game. Now, in my case, I think it's better to have it below the game over. So what we can do is we can simply go to our game HUD scene and we just move it below here. There we go. Right, so that was pretty much it for this tutorial. We added a way to check if the game is over. We also made a little bit of a UI that can obviously be improved, and if you want, even match it to the Tetris style, but that is entirely up to you. If that is something you want to see me do, please let me know in the comments and I'll actually go ahead and do that, because this tutorial is pretty much over. I know I was saying that it was going to be an 8-part series, but it turns out that it's not really needed. So we also added the game over screen and a way to start a new game, which I just noticed is actually still a bit buggy, so let's fix that. Yeah, in our start new game, we also want to make sure that the start game button is also not visible. One small issue I noticed that I just fixed, we also want to make sure that the start game button is by default not visible when we hit start new game. Because we go down here and we actually set the visibility to true, we also basically never go again into this ready function. So that way our visibility wasn't being set to false again. So that's my bad. We actually want to make sure we also do that in the start new game. So I even think we can delete it right there in the ready function and we just call it in the start new game. Yep, we get start new game, we click it and now it disappears again. So that's a very nice. So yeah, we went ahead and made a HUD. You can make it to match the Tetris theme yourself. If this is something you want to see me do, please let me know in the comments and I might make another video about it. Now, as for the future of this series, I don't really have anything more to show you. There was a comment on the first episode that wanted to see a certain way of moving the Tetris pieces with the rotation. Which is SRS plus or something. Now, I'm not familiar with Tetris terms, but I will go ahead and look into that, and I might make a video about that as well. That could be matched into one, where I make that rotation physic implementation, and then also update the UI to match Tetris a bit more, if that's something that you want. Otherwise, that was it for the Tetris tutorial. Now, if there is something you'd like to see in the future, a different series or a different game I'm gonna remake, please let me know in the comments. And that was it. So thanks for watching and bye bye.